Hello and welcome. So welcome to Discover Dorico for today. Today is Wednesday the 22nd of May. If you're watching this live, welcome. If you're not, then you know when this is recorded, and I'll be using Dorico version 2.2.20 today. I will be watching the comments as well, hopefully keeping tabs on those. So if anybody can let me know if they can't hear me or if they have any problems with that, I'll keep an eye on that. I'm amused that we have a Bill Murray online watching us. Hello. I'm sure it's not the Bill Murray. My name's John Barons. If you want to look me up, you'll find I'm a pseudonym for Donald Trump. It's true, look it up. Just to make sure you're seeing the best quality options, if you click on underneath at the bottom of the video window, click on the HD option for the settings, then you can change the quality. You might want to change the quality there to 720p if you can do it, and then you'll see the best options on the screen. Hopefully you can all hear me. Nobody said that they haven't. Can somebody just let me know if they can? I've not seen anything yet. There we go. I just put a message on there as well, so can you all hear me? So since our last session a month ago, if you haven't seen it already, please go and watch the Alan Silvestri video on our YouTube channel, so youtube.com/Dorico, which is possibly where you got to from here. Yes. So, Dorico in multiple screens if you want to. So it came up a bit on Facebook. People didn't. So here, this is a picture, admittedly, but you can see I've got the same Dorico project open in all 5 modes at the same time. So in the center here, I've got it open in write mode. I've got setup mode open over here on the left. I've also got play mode open over here on the right. I've got print mode, and down here you can see I've got engrave mode open here. Apparently audio is dropping in and out a little bit. So I'll keep talking and let's hope that it's going to carry on and be okay. Yes, apparently audio dropping out. I did get a slight distortion at my end as well. Let me know if it gets really bad or if it changes, but hopefully it will be okay. So as I said, this project here that I've got open, you can see I've got it open in multiple windows. If you have multiple monitors, then you can use that and use that to great advantage. So for example, this is 2 screenshots because I was running 2 monitors at this point. Now I can't stream on this live stream both monitors at the same time, so this is a picture. But you can see you could have, for example, open write mode and you could have play mode open at the same time. You'll see here I've turned on the green playback marker as well, so you can see lined up exactly where you are on both views at the same time. So the 2 windows will keep in sync. Other options maybe would be to have write mode open on one monitor, and maybe to have Halion open or some reverb plugins or other plugins open on another monitor, and maybe the mixer, you could have that open on another monitor if you wanted to. Of course, our options dialogues, you can also leave these open. So here I've got open the engraving options, notation options, the layout options and playback options on one monitor while I'm working in write mode over here on the left hand side, because you can choose the options in here and just press apply. You don't have to close these dialogues. If you want to, you can leave them open on a second monitor. You're not limited to those dimensions either. So if you, I change one of my monitors to be portrait here, so I have the write mode open twice here. So I've got write mode on the left with the score, and I've got a part open on the right hand side in portrait mode, so I can see how that looks. So again, another option for how you might want to make that look and how you want to configure your monitors. And you can use multiple monitors, it doesn't have to be just 2. So my limit at the moment is 3. If I use this over here was actually a screenshot from an iPad, There are iPad apps available that let you use an iPad if you have one as an external monitor for your computer. I use it more when I'm traveling, to be honest. But here I've got the laptop screen in the middle, I've got an external monitor on one side, I've got another external monitor which is actually the iPad over here. So in this one, what I'm actually showing here is that yes, I've got the mixer open, I've also got Lily's help documentation open here. So I'm looking at the expression maps dialog entry, maybe while I'm working on something else. So you can have multiple screens and things open just with the mixer over here, or to include more Dorico windows over there. You could also, for example, have the engraving options dialog maybe open on one monitor and leave that open on one monitor while you're working on write mode and play mode. So I just wanted to kind of say there are multiple options of how you do this. So let's look at how you might set a couple of these things up very quickly in Dorico. So here we've got a score open. And what you want to do is, if you don't have a little bar at the top up here, then you need to go to the window menu and go to show tabs. And when you've got the tabs displayed here, they're normally on by default, but just in case they're not, that's how you turn them on. Then there's a plus item over here, and you can say new tab. You can also use a shortcut for that, so you'll see in the window menu there's a shortcut for new tab, so you can have, there you see on my Mac it's Command T. So I'm going to, at the moment, for example, just put a full score in there, so I've got the piano part and a full score. Now on most computers you can just click and drag that away and it will make it into a new window, or you can right click on it and say move tab to new window. So if I move tab to new window, then here I've got the piano part open, and here I've got it in a second window as well. So I could put this window, for example, in play mode or in engrave mode. So let's put this one in play mode. Let's make this one a bit bigger. Let's turn off the right hand panel. Now if I had two monitors that you could see, then I could move one of these screens onto my second monitor. Actually at the moment I'm just going to split the screen, so I'm going to split it left and right like this. So I've got write mode over here and I've got play mode over here. So for example, if I say from here I was going to play from here, then it's also keeping play mode in sync here, so I can see where I am. If you want the playback line to be on all the time, so you can always see it here as well, that's just an option in the preferences. So in the play section you can say show playhead when stopped, and if you do that then you'll see the play line in here as well. I normally don't have that on, but you've got that if you want it. So this is just an example with just two options here. I've got two windows, but you can, if you have multiple monitors, you decide what you want in each monitor and act accordingly. And just in case somebody wants to know, on my Mac, because there isn't an easy way of dividing screens up, left and right, I do have another tool installed. It isn't a free tool, unfortunately, but I find it quite useful. There's a couple of options available, but the one I happen to have installed is called Better Snap Tool. It's Better Snap Tool. If you Google that, you'll find it in the App Store. Windows has a couple of options for these things anyway, but I like this one. And when I drag, for example, to the right-hand side of the screen, then I can just make it automatically fill that side. So, any questions on any of that? I only mention it, like I said, because various people seemed surprised that you could use multiple monitors and how you could do it and that kind of thing. So I just wanted to show various options here and show you how you do that in one of the videos. So I can't see any comments so far on that. The audio seems to be better, so that's good. No? Okay, well I'll carry on for a second. If you do have any comments, then let me know. So moving on from that bit, I wanted to just quickly look at an option that, to be honest, confused me a little too. So very quickly, in the engraving options dialog, for example, there are these buttons at the bottom that says save as default and save to reset defaults. I know what's about to happen. No. He's gone away. Good, the ice cream van might have gone past and you might have missed it. Oh no, there he goes. Okay, yeah, well. Anybody want an ice cream? So, in the engraving options dialog, there are these two buttons, save as default and reset to save defaults. You'll also possibly find that if you hold down the Alt key, that they'll change to remove save defaults and reset to factory. I just wanted to highlight this because there's actually 4 options in these 2 buttons here. So you can save the current set of options. So if you've made changes, you can save them as your defaults. You can also reset to the reset to save defaults changes the settings in the dialog back to how they were the last time you clicked the save as default button. So if you've saved your defaults, then you've made some more changes and gone, I don't like those, you can reset to save defaults. There's also a reset to factory option, and there's a remove save defaults. So you can say change the settings in the dialog back to the default options that Dorico ships with, that's reset to factory, and you can also delete the file that contains your save defaults. So if you've made a mess of your save defaults and you want to remove it, then you can delete that file from your computer if you want to, but that doesn't affect the current project and the settings in it. If that's confusing, handily, you can go and check out our online documentation. Ta-da! And if you search for example, the engraving options dialog in the search box, so you're on steinberg.help, you're in the Dorico Pro 2 section, search for engraving options dialog, and this will tell you in here about these 2 buttons here, and you can read sections 4 and 5, and it will tell you all about it. So I just wanted to highlight that because it came up in the week again, as I said, or over the last month actually, that it was a bit of confusion, so that just wanted to clear it up. Apart from a hello from Portugal, hi Ricardo, I don't think we've got any questions at the moment, so I'm going to carry on. So one of the next option, actually one of the next things somebody asked me about was they had some text on the last page. So this, I suppose, this isn't an option in Elements, apologies there, but the option was that they put some text in Engrave mode, so here's some text in Engrave mode. Actually, while I mention it, in these text boxes, if you need it, at the bottom here there's a vertical alignment, and you can specify the vertical alignment of the text in the box. I only mention it because, again, there was a question about that in the week. Somebody's just said, can I repeat the name of the app? Presumably you mean Better Snap Tool. If I go up here, here you go, Better Snap Tool. That was the one I was using to format the screens. In fact, I'm going to use that again in a bit to specify certain screen sizes. There are other options available. I think Daniel actually uses a different one. The name escapes me right now, so I know I'm not saying you must buy that one. It's just one I happen to be using on my computer, so I wanted to just mention what it was I was using. So as I said, so we've got this text box here, and the question came up because they'd added a text box, which of course is, if we go down here, you can see it's an override, of course, because it's not following a template, so we have a little red override triangle on the right-hand side over here. And the question came up because the part had changed over time. Now, I think in the particular example, it had multiple instruments in it. I think it was for percussion, and one of the percussion instruments was no longer there, so there were more multi-rests and less pages used in the score, or in the part, sorry. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to say, look, if I use a smaller staff size, I can kind of get to the same bit. So here is my piano music as it exists in this part, but then I have some blank pages. There's 1, 2, 3 blank pages, and then the text at the end. And the question came to me was, how do I remove those blank pages? Because if you go over here, there are no overrides to, well, there's an override on this page, but there aren't overrides on these other pages. So how do you remove them? Why are they there? Because there isn't a delete page option. Well, the reason here is that when this text box was placed on the page, it was placed specifically onto page 8. So it stays on page 8, even though the music now takes up less space. So actually what you need to do here is you need to click on page 8, and you need to go to move pages, and you need to say, actually, I now want it to be after page, in my case, I want it to be after page 4. So if I do that, it will move that text frame to after page 4, which automatically removes all of the extra blank pages. So I just wanted to know, just wanted to let people know that's how that particular bit works in Engrave mode. There's a question, all I want to know is whether you finally implemented Guitar Tab yet. No, we have not yet implemented Guitar Tab. I'm using version 2.2.20 of Dorico, and there is no news at the moment on any new versions or features. I'm not looking at any new features actually today. Sorry Robbie, if you want to not stay, so we'll be sad. So let's There's also a question which is not related to what we're doing. In change of a tempo, can you change the percentage to BPM? I don't believe you can at the moment, no. Maybe one day, but no, I don't believe you can at the moment. The other question I had while I'm in Engrave mode quickly was that these buttons over here, somebody said, I spend a lot of time clicking on these buttons to adjust the staff spacing or the note spacing or the frames or anything else. It would be great if I can set shortcuts to those. And the answer is you already can. So if you go into the key command section of the preferences in here, actually it's best to search probably for these. So the top one is called Edit Graphically. Oh, I can't type. So in here, Edit Graphically is this top button here. If you want to, the frames one underneath, then if you search for Edit Frames, you'll find that. And the other ones are Edit Staff Spacing and Edit Note Spacing. So actually, if I just put spacing, then you'll find in the Edit section, you have Edit Note Spacing and Edit Staff Spacing. So these buttons here, if you want to set a shortcut for those, either from your keyboard or from Metagrid or from Stream Deck or anything else, then that's where the options exist in Dorico, and you can set a key command or a MIDI learn function for any of those buttons. So the next things I want to look at, and I didn't give you much of an overview today, I want to look at some editing options and moving notes around and a couple of shortcuts and things. I want to focus a fair bit on shortcuts and also on some MIDI import options today. So the next one I'm going to look at is about moving notes around, and just a couple of things that again come up that I think are worth highlighting. So in Dorico here, there's a little quick example file just for a few things we need. You'll know, of course, presumably by now, that when you want to edit a note, because the arrow keys will let you move around in the score. So if I have this note selected and I press right, you can move around, but also up and down will also move to the staff above and below. I also mentioned on Facebook, I know that sometimes when you're moving left and right, it jumps to somewhere you're not expecting, and we are looking into that, and we have something I can't tell you about right now, but there you go. So we are looking into that. You'll also know, of course, that if you hold down the Alt key and then press up and down, that you can change the pitch. And hopefully you also know that if you hold down the Alt key and press the right arrow, then you can move that note along along the rhythm grid. So the rhythm grid is this option set down here. So currently I'm on quavers. So you can move a note along the rhythm grid. So if I Alt right or Alt left, then I can move that note. You can also press Alt N and move the note up, and you can move the note down. So if you want to move up to another staff or down to a staff, then you can do that. And of course, you'll see Dorico is then reforming the viola part to make a full bar rest again. So Alt N and M for November and Mother. There isn't a why is N and M. I'm not entirely sure. It does work with the cross staff beaming options as well. So N and M are also up and down for cross staff beaming. So Alt N and M. But if you just remember up and down, then first the key on the left is up and the one on the right is down. But so you can do, for example, you can move this note to the right, you can move it down, you can move it left, you can move it right, and you don't have to use copy and paste for any of these options. You may have noticed that when I moved it up to a staff above, it also adds it to that chord, so it's not replacing something. If you've tried to do things like this and you've selected this note and use Alt-click, then you'll find it replaces the note that's already there. There is an option actually, if you press Q for chords, so you're in chord mode, when I select this note and copy it up here, then it will add it as a chord. So there's another option for you. But sometimes it's easier just to use Alt M or N. I just switched to the part by accident by pressing W. So like I said, you can move this one. Now you'll also find that when you're there are some options that you want to use which involve elongating notes, or making them longer or shorter. So if I use Alt Shift right, then this note becomes longer by, again, along the rhythm grid. Possibly not any major surprise to people. You'll also find if you do this with insert mode on, so if I move this note to the right, then as expected, if I elongate it, then that's fine. But if I do it with insert mode on, press undo, turn on insert mode, I, and press Alt Shift right, then you'll see that this note is also moving because you're now, as that note gets longer, it's pushing everything else out of the way to keep the rests all the same in the middle or the other notes if there were any. So you may or may not want to use insert mode when you're elongating notes. Also, somebody asked me about they had this rhythm here, and they were pressing T, and what they were getting wasn't what they wanted. Now, one of the options, of course, would be to say that in the notation options, you can come into here and say for note grouping, you can choose notate as a single note instead of splitting up the half bar. But that, in this case, would give you a double dotted minim or double dotted half note, which also wasn't what they wanted. So the question was, how do I get, if I just go back, how do I get that note tied to that note? And the answer is you press O for forced duration. This also came up actually in the Tips Tuesday video yesterday. So now if I press T, because the forced duration, which is O, is on, then it keeps that exactly as it was and just ties it to the next note. You'll also find, so of course, if I take this note and I extend it with Alt Shift Right, then I'll get this option. But if I didn't want that, if actually I was looking more for this kind of rhythm because I was still inputting notes, then if I press O first and then Alt Shift Right, then it will extend it and I'll get that rhythm. So I always say use forced duration sparingly, but that is a case where you might want to use it as a particular override. And while these notes are selected, if you decide that actually you don't want those and you just press O, then they'll revert back to the notation option defaults that you have set. So hopefully that kind of encapsulates all of those options. Also, this one's already done. I didn't mean to do that. If you've been inputting by a MIDI keyboard, or you've imported a MIDI file and you've got this kind of thing, this kind of chord, and actually it was supposed to be on 2 staves, then you can select the notes that you need and you can just use Alt-M, and it was effectively a cut and paste into the stuff below, which is quite a neat option, especially if it's just a few notes that you want to move because the MIDI split point wasn't right. Quick check on questions, bear with me a second. Yes, good point. The question about the change of tempo, thank you, Paul. If you switch to play mode, yes. If you have a RIT and you want to adjust it by BPM, then yes, you can drag the point in play mode to set the tempo. So what we mean there is in play mode up here, there's a time option. And in here, if you use the pencil tool or the line tool, you can adjust the tempo to be exactly what you want. And I don't know if you can quite see it on my screen, but just up here in the top left corner, there's a little number which is telling you the BPM at that point, at the mouse pointer position. So you can use that and set it to the exact value that you want. Great. Is there a simplified version of Dorico for iPad use with digital pens for sketches? There isn't at the moment. I'm not saying that we necessarily have plans or are about to announce that we're going to do one. To be honest, it's not really a quicker method using a pencil in most cases, but it sometimes might be nice for little sketches. There are a number of iPad apps and Surface Pro apps that you can use if you want to do that kind of thing, but we don't do any of them ourselves. I mean, it may also be nice to have a Dorico file reader that you can use for sheet music on an iPad or something one day, but we don't have that yet. We do, however, import music XML well. So, for example, from StaffPad on the Microsoft Surface, they even have an export to Dorico option, I believe, but it sends us a music XML file and you can import it that way. So we're aiming at the moment more to work well with others. I think on the iPad at the moment, I'd probably suggest something like Notion, if you wanted to do that kind of thing. And then when you want to actually do the kind of the more published version of it, just import that as XML into Dorico. However, today I'm actually going to be looking at MIDI importing in just a second. And a long note in the violin part where I want to split the bow. I think maybe what you want to do there, Dennis, is select the individual bits of the notes in Engrave mode, I think. I'm not sure if I understand the question. If I didn't, email me, discoverdorico@steinberg.de, and I'll answer that one for you. Right, so let's carry on for a second. So the next thing I wanted to look at was importing MIDI, because there's a few things that maybe we've vaguely talked about before, but not necessarily shown very much. I'm always happy with any of these things if somebody says, I'd really like to know, with this particular file, how you would do something. So if you want to send me anything, great. But at the moment, you are forced to use my examples. So here is an example MIDI file. I'm actually just going to double click on the MIDI file, or I'm going to just drag it and drop it onto Dorico. So this is going to open it as a new file. Our MIDI import options here says, and I've got interpret as general MIDI and use GM program changes to identify instruments ticked, because if you don't know where the MIDI files come from, it's sometimes a useful option to have on. Similarly, often in a MIDI file, depending on where you've got it from, the drums are often on channel 10. The use MIDI track names for instruments, yeah, if you've got them, great. Sometimes they're not all that useful. If you click on the quantize options, then of course in here you can set your quantize options. Now I know for this particular piece I'll probably want those. Yes, and I'm going to detect tuplets as well at the same value, so I'm going to use semiquavers for both of those, and I'm going to leave on fill gaps. We'll look into some of these options in a bit more detail in a bit. I'll use a split point. Don't think there are any pedal lines. I'll preserve the note velocities, preserve the note positions. I'm going to create a player group for new players and create parts as well for all the new players. So all the options on, and press OK, and we'll import this MIDI file. Ah, I see. There was the question about violin up bow, down bow. Yes. Actually, Andre's got a good point. What you probably want to do is turn the caret line on, so press enter, turn the caret on, use the arrow keys to navigate to the exact position in the long held note where you want that up bow or down bow, and then use the shift P playing techniques pop over to enter the up bow or down bow. So, sorry, I was just reading the comments there. Yes, I think I misunderstood. So here I have my MIDI file. So this is one option. Now I just want to tweak a couple of things in this MIDI file for a couple of examples. So for example, in normally when you're selecting parts, you can select something here and you can press one of my favorite ones is Command Shift A or Control Shift A if you're on a PC, and if you press it a couple of times then you can get that part selected all the way through a score, which can be very useful. However, when you come down to a drum part like this and you do Command Shift A, nothing happens. So the other option you might want to use is in the edit menu, which is select to end of flow. And that will, if you've got something selected, select that now to the end of the flow. There's also select to end of system. If you think you might need that a lot, then go and set a shortcut for it. There isn't one by default, but you can set one. So again, that's in our preferences key commands, and you can just search for that in this top box and set yourself a shortcut for it if you want one. Sorry, a key command. Now in this part, what I'm going to do is, I know that in some parts of this file, we have some tuplets here which actually don't need to be there. So what I'm going to use now is edit requantize. And I've set a shortcut for this because I might go in there a few times today. So the requantize option. So for the selected drum part, I'm going to requantize it, turn off the tuplets because I don't want them for the drum part, but I do want them for some of the other parts. And that's now requantize this. So what it does is it goes back to the original MIDI that we've stored, and it's requantized those notes accordingly. Now, while I'm on the drum part, actually, there's too much cowbell in there. So what I'm going to do is go to setup mode, and I'm going to find my drum set here, and I'm going to go to edit percussion kit. Now I'm not saying too much cowbell is a bad thing, I'm just saying you might want to give it to somebody else. So here I'm going to remove the instrument from the kit, and that, as I exported it, you see it's over here. Well, I exported it, it's moved it into here as its own player. So now, although it's on the same player, it has its own staff, so the drum part's a bit neater. And if you want to, you could make a new part, so just press the plus button, drag the cowbell down to it, and have its own separate cowbell part, should you want to. I know a trombone player called Dave who'd be very happy with that. So now that might be an easy way to tidy things up. In some cases, you want to do the complete opposite. Your MIDI part will be imported lots and lots of drum staves, and you want to amalgamate them all together. So you may want to use the opposite, which is when you've got a blank drum kit with nothing in it, you can use this button and you can bring in other instruments into the drum kit and position them accordingly. So you don't need to filter and copy and paste things and that kind of thing. You can just bring those things in and out. One of the other things you might want to do, of course, with MIDI files is find things like horn parts. What have we got here? So here I've got, it thinks they're two French horns. Interesting. When there probably should be 5 players doing all of these. So the other options with MIDI files is don't start with just opening a MIDI file. You might have a template that you want to put these things into. So here we have a blank template. You say, oh, there's a shortcut here I've used to maximize the window. Again, that's a Better Snap Tool shortcut that I've set. It's not a Dorico option. So what you can do in here is add an ensemble. And you can say, for example, you can say, I want some brass instruments, but you might want, in my case, 5 pop horns, so 2 trumpets, alto, tenor, and trombone. So I'll add those to the score. So it may be that you've got a template, or I'm just looking to make some horn parts, and this is what I'm actually starting with. If you need the add ensemble a lot, by the way, while new solo player and new section player both have shortcuts, add ensemble doesn't have one by default, but again, you can set one if you want to use it, if it's something you use a lot. So here I've got my players. So now I'm going to go to File, Import, MIDI. I'm going to choose the same MIDI file and open it. I've got the same options. Yeah, okay, that'll do. And what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to create a player group for the new players. And I'm not going to create part layouts for the new players because actually they're unnecessary at the moment. I only want 5 horn parts. So I'm going to press OK, and what it'll do this time is import the MIDI file, ask me if I want to create new players or merge. I don't think it'll manage to merge anyway, so I'll create new players. And in this case, he says, waiting for a second. Nacho Gonzalez, a video with the integration between Dorico and Cubase. I'm going to look into importing some MIDI stuff from Cubase in just a second, but I've not got there yet. Not necessarily integration, but a neat option. So here I've got a group with my MIDI import, so I know exactly which instruments were imported from my MIDI file. And here I've got the instruments I wanted, and I've got 2 flows. So I've got my blank flow that I had initially, and I've got my MIDI file, which doesn't fit on this size paper. Now what I actually wanted was just to take the 2 horn parts and make these 5 players parts. So in my case, what I'm going to do is create down here a new custom score layout. So I've got a custom score, it's got nothing in it, it's got no players and no flows. So in this custom score layout, I'm going to say I would like these 5 players, like that. I would also like these 2 horn bits from the MIDI file, and I'd like this flow. So now when I go to here, my custom score layout, and I'll go into write mode, I've now just got those, and what I'm going to do is switch to galley view so that I can see the horn instruments here, and I failed to add, oh yes, they don't exist yet, do they? These players, look, when I clicked on this one here, my example MIDI file contains these players, so my custom score, it didn't get all the right options. So now I'm going to tick these, so I'm going to add these 5 players to the MIDI file as well, because otherwise these players don't exist in this flow. I'm going to go to, oh yes, Nacho said in the comments he's tempted to check out Cubase after watching Alan's video. I'm not necessarily going to show you the options Alan used, although actually maybe we could do a video on something along that one day. So here are my custom score. I now have my 5 trumpet players and my horns. So for example, you might want to use options like taking these notes and copying them and selecting these players and use paste special explode. Doesn't have a default shortcut. If you want a shortcut, go to key commands and set it. If it's something you want to use a lot and use the explode option, then go and set yourself a shortcut for that. No problem there at all. So you could do that, and separate various things out. You'll get slightly different results with some of these. So for example, if I copy all of these and copy them to 5 players, you've got a paste option, you've got a paste special option for explode, as we just used, and they're slightly different, and you'll get different results. Don't forget, with any of these, you can also use the shortcuts we used before, so Alt-M to move them down to another staff. You can also, with any of these selected, if you want to duplicate any of these things, again, there's a paste special, duplicate to staff below. It doesn't have a default shortcut, so if you want to make one, then you can go and set yourself a shortcut for that if it's the kind of thing you're going to want a lot. If you have more than one staff selected, then also in paste special is swap, and again, it doesn't have a default shortcut, but you can set one. So you can swap these 2 staves around if you want to. So you can very quickly build up either with duplicates and swapping things around and copying from any of these the parts that you want to create. Now I just wanted to go back also to the score for a second. I'm going to put this on bigger paper. This is getting silly, isn't it? When you import a MIDI file into Dorico, it will, based on the number of staves, guess the paper size. But in this particular case, what happened is because I started just with 5 horns at the beginning, I'd already set the paper size as A4 at that point, so I needed to go and change it. So that wasn't actually Dorico being necessarily silly, it was me, as usual. So now, also in this file, you might want to use some other options. So, for example, in bar 70, I used Command G, Control G on PC, type 70, press enter, and then you'll get to bar 70. So, for example, here in this file, depending on how you've imported it, if you'd forgot to import it with the tuplets on, then the requantize options, you might have found that you got, for example, this. I'm just going to put this back in galley view. So here we go. So when you get things like, duplicated notes and things like that, it may just be that for one bar or for, a limited section in the piece, that you want to use edit requantize and just choose tuplets or a shorter note value or whatever you need to get the music to look right at that point. Actually, I've got a feeling that this bit here should actually probably be even quicker. So I can just do things like, oh no, I took the wrong option. Haha. Yeah. So, you can just do it for individual bits. So you're not limited by importing the quantize options that you had at the beginning in the MIDI file. You're not set by those forevermore in this file. Now, obviously, some of these, these horn parts, actually, I don't need them in here in the end because they're going to be using these top horn parts at the top. So I'm not too worried about some of the collisions and things in here just yet. There's also some things you might want to do. So, for example, if you are using filters a lot, so where should we do this one? Let me just have a look. Oh, actually, we can do it in this section back here. Where were we? Bar 70, that's where we were. If you're using filters and things, there's a couple of things you might want to check out here, which is when you, for example, want to filter the notes in chords and bottom notes or single notes or top notes and single notes, when you run that, you'll see it selects all of the bottom notes. You also have the tuplet brackets selected. So be careful. You can, of course, copy these to another staff. So if I alt-click, no problem. If you were to use the option I told you to use earlier, Alt-N, for example, and move these notes up, then it will also move the tuplet brackets, which means the tuplet brackets are no longer here, and this bar doesn't actually make sense anymore. So you probably don't want to do that. You probably do want to copy things. However, when you're filtering things, you have a number of options, and they don't have, again, they don't have shortcuts by default. So the top, second, third, fourth, and bottom. It also may be you want to filter everything except something. So you can deselect. So you could filter as a deselect instead of select, and all of these options you can set shortcuts for. So if this is the thing you want to do, especially in orchestrating wise, if you want to filter, for example, top notes, then you can have top or single notes, but you can also have a filter for deselect. So the filter select or deselect, you can set that as a shortcut. So especially power users who want to use Metagrid, Stream Deck, things like that, or just because you've got shortcuts that you want to set on your keyboard, then select and deselect is an option. It might be an interesting option to use for you. But also filtering individual notes, top, bottom. But also you might want to say that you want to filter tuplet. I've written triplet. So, for example, here you can filter tuplets. So if you set a shortcut for that, or if you filter tuplets, then if I go in here, and you'll see we have a tuplets option, then it will just filter the tuplet brackets. So sometimes for either selections or deselections, selecting or deselecting, you might want to include the brackets options in there. So there's all sorts of options there, depending on what your source material is and what you're aiming for, that you might want to set shortcuts up for, but you can really speed up the workflow of things that you do there. I'm just going to check my notes and see if I'd missed anything on those. I think that was okay. So the next thing I want to look at, oh, hang on, just let me check the comments. Horizontal swap between two bars. Not at the moment, no. I don't think so. So what you mean is to say actually this bar and this bar, but that takes it as one selection. You can't select this bar and this bar individually. So now, for example, if you tried to say edit, paste spatial, swap, then nothing happens because it's taken that as one selection, and you can't make two distinct selections like that at the moment. And if you were to kind of do this one and this bar, for example, then again, it's not the kind of thing that option's. Oh, interesting. It swapped it that way. That wasn't what you wanted either. So not exactly what you want at the moment, no. But maybe one day, yeah. That's not a bad option. So the next thing I wanted to look at, and this will be the last thing, is that I have here Cubase running. Ta-da! Here is a MIDI project in Cubase. So it may be that actually what you want to do is take some of this information and actually put it into Dorico. Now, of course, you can import MIDI files, you can import music XML files if you want to, and in many cases that may be a good option. But there's also an option where you can just drag the MIDI from here into Dorico. And sometimes to build things up, actually, instead of importing everything and then having to kind of sort through the possible mess of things that you've imported and there's too much, you might just want to drag some of the things from here into Dorico. So let's look at some of these things as the last thing today. So this violin part in Cubase looks like this, because all of the notes were deliberately played very short to get the sample to trigger correctly. So that's not how you'd normally notate it, of course, in Dorico. What else have we got here? There's a violin 2 part, so we'll probably take that one. So here's the violin 2 part at the moment as it exists in Cubase. And let's also look at, let's take the double bass part here. So let's have a look at that. Those notes are okay, and later on, this is a quantizing thing where the note is very long, but to make sure it blends into the next one, there's some overlaps here, and that's not quite working either. So, like I said, you could export this as a MIDI file if you wanted to, but let's say we have a new Dorico project. And let's say that this new Dorico project has an ensemble, and we're just going to say string, and it'll give me the string section. So in one go, you can add a string section, and you can use that at any time. So again, ensembles, if you want to set a shortcut for that, it's quite useful. Now I'm going to split my screen. So again, I'm cheating. I'm using Better Snap Tool. Sorry. Here I've got Cubase at the top, and I've got Dorico at the bottom. Now I'm going to go in here. You could, if you want to, let's say, all right, you don't have to put bars in, but let's say this is going to be in 4/4 at crotchet equals, I think it's 100 and something, let's say 160. And if you want to, you can add bars in here as well if you want to. It would help if I selected something. So, you can add some bars if you want to, but you don't necessarily need to. Now in play mode, we've got all our instruments listed here. So if I take my violin here from Cubase, and I can drag it into play mode. So I'm not dragging it into write mode, I'm dragging it into play mode, because then I can drag it into a specific place. So this one here, if I say I want to drag this into, who's going to start at the beginning? Let's say the double basses are starting at the beginning, so let's put them in there. So I'll drag that to the beginning. So I'll import my double bass. Anytime now. No? Okay, it failed. Well done, me. Let's make sure I've selected it properly and drag that to there. There we go. So I've got my double bass, and I take the violin 2 and put that there, and I'll take the violin 1. Let's put him, I'm not sure it wants to be at the beginning actually, but never mind, we'll drag it into there anyway. So now I've dragged in these MIDI regions into Dorico. So let's see what they look like. So I'm just going to expand this so we can have a look at it. Let's switch it into, yeah, this is the kind of thing we were seeing in Cubase. So I'm going to delete these extra notes because they're probably just key switches that I didn't need. Now, with these notes here, for example, in the violin part, Paul, if you're online, correct me if I'm wrong, it will use the last quantize options that you had set. So this is probably the last quantize option I had set. Doesn't matter. I'm going to check the comments in a minute and see if Paul was watching. No, not yet. Anyway, so maybe he will. So if I select this violin part, so I'm going to use select all. Select more. So that's in here. It does have a default shortcut. So you've got select more here. That's what I'm using. And now I'm going to use renotate, and I'm going to say, actually, don't detect tuplets, I don't need them, and just make them quavers. There we go, and make those all staccato, please. You also, so for example here, oh dear, in this violin part here, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to say select more, renotate those as quavers. There we go, that's much better. And then these ones here. Now actually these ones, this is interesting. If I select all of these, I think I'll find if I renotate them much shorter, you can actually see here the what's happening. But Dorico still isn't putting in the overlaps. It's still clever enough to work that out. If you go into play mode, you'll see this as well. So you can go into play mode here. Sorry, I get a bit interested in this kind of thing. You can see that the notes overlap, but Dorico is saying, no, I don't need to do that. Oh, I didn't do all of it. There we go. Let's have a bit more. So tidying up MIDI parts can be, it can be pretty quick. To use the requantize option in Dorico, even if they've been quantized exactly before in Cubase, it's a good option. You may also find when you play these back, because you've imported the live start data and the live, so here we've got playback start offset, playback end offset. So each note will know exactly when it started, exactly when it ends for playback. If you then find that, for example, now you've tidied it up and you've added the staccato dots, that you don't want any of that data, you can select all of it or just some notes, and in play mode, you can go to play and you can go to reset playback overrides. And what that will do is, if I go up to the violin part up here, you'll see that the selected notes, it's now removed all of the playback options, whereas these notes that I hadn't selected, you see they're all starting early and that kind of thing. So if you have a difference and you want to remove that now, you don't need that play difference because maybe you're using different samples now and you don't need them to start early, for example, then you can remove that option as well in play mode there. So let me just check the comments and see if there's anything I've missed in there. Ah, yes. So the question is, I don't think I can easily show this one, can I? Maybe I can. So when I was dragging these items in earlier, you might have two staves. For example, there's a staccato one here and a violins one. So what you could do is say that in the violin part later on, for example, I want these staccato notes. It's a different MIDI region, but you can drag it into the same staff here in Dorico, and then it will effectively amalgamate those parts. So here we have all the staccato bits. So yes, you can drag in multiple MIDI regions from here into the same, let's call it a track, the same instrument in Dorico. So here, I don't know if I dragged those in terribly well, but there you go. Yes, here we go. So here's all the extra ones I just dragged in. So if I want to select, maybe I now want to select these and requantize them. Well, let's just do some of them. So I can requantize those now as quavers as well. So yeah, so you can drag multiple MIDI regions onto the same instrument in Dorico. Hopefully that explains that bit. So I think I should probably leave it there. I've waffled on for quite a while today. Apologies. So as I said, there's lots of things that don't have shortcuts for by default in Dorico, but you can add shortcuts to them. So if you decide actually what would be really useful is a shortcut for this, it may well already exist, and you can set a shortcut for it, even though a shortcut doesn't exist by default in Dorico. So this session will now be available to recap on online. As usual, if you have any questions, if you have any things that you think would be good to cover in the next Discover session, which should be at the end of June, then let me know. My email address for this is discoverdorico@steinberg.de. Discoverdorico is all one word @steinberg.de. And yeah, I'll add the time comments underneath the video soon, so you'll be able to jump to specific sections. If you want to rewatch this video. Yes, so thank you very much for watching.